there was a question about
For
Effect.Service.
service, yeah.
You want to take that one, Mattia?
I can try, yeah. And there's a link with examples. Let me see the link. Okay, so in here
Um,
we have initially monolithic service that returns an object for a single effect generator. Every method is defined in line. This works for 3-4 methods, but at 10 plus, you get 300 lines per file, where the service definition is the business logic. And then, because I will, I mean, I mean,
I have strong opinions about this.
I, I mean, I would say a strong opinion as well first, and then we can like try to tone it down. I would say that if you have like a service that's so big, probably you have to split that service into many services because you are probably doing too much things in a single place. And that's my first like strong opinion. I don't know if you want to say yours as well.
Yeah, I think that, like Mattia said, if your service is getting so big that you feel like the file is unwieldy, then you need that. Like that's a clear, like that's a very clear indicator that you should probably break that service into multiple. But beyond that, I feel like there's this weird thing about like file size in like the TypeScript world, like where people, and I understand like as files grow, the TS language server doesn't perform as well, whatever. But like if it makes sense to keep everything in a single file, just keep it in a single file. Like I have huge services sometimes if it makes sense. And like I don't know. I just feel like there's this weird thing about, oh, my file's too big. But like I certainly understand if you're having issues with your tooling, like the language server is getting slow or it's hard to like scroll through the file. But if it makes sense to keep things together, you should. So, like, to concretely answer these questions, is the standalone functions that yield depths pattern idiomatic and effect, or is it fighting the grain? It's not fighting the grain per se. You can do this. It just it's more about like, do your individual functions make more sense as part of a service or not, right? Like here, all of these functions are going to have a dependency on Postgres service, right? But what if you want to have a test implementation of this that does not rely on a Postgres service? Like that just stubs this out. That's
Mm.
impossible to do now. You have to like provide a mock Postgres service, which is really annoying. Instead, if this were packaged up into a service that you could swap the definition of at runtime, you could have a mock implementation of the service that didn't need a Postgres service and just maybe return some like static data. If you did want to do this, like if you wanted to put things in a different file, like this is one case where I would consider taking like PG
Yeah, as parameter.
as a type, as a parameter, and avoid putting it in here. But again, then you introduce the same problem of you have to pass a Postgres service to this function if you want to use it. Like it's I don't know. I think that keeping things localized into the service, while yes, it can make your services grow larger. I think it's the most idiomatic thing, and it
Mm.
lends itself to flexibility. And if you're getting to the point where you feel like your service is unwieldy, that's probably an indicator you should be splitting up services. Like you should separate concerns. Yeah. So here, the second question gets at it. What's the recommended decomposition for a service with lots and lots of methods,
So
subservices,
services.
modules, something? Yeah, just more services. There's
Mm.
no limit to the number of services an Effect app can have. So just separate things out into services that make sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My hot take here is that a large service, a big file doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
personally, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
like the TypeScript like code base have a checker that is like hundreds of lines. That does not mean that that's not working code. That's bad. That's just having everything in a single context, and that's fine.
the class body of Effect.Service can only hold static members. Is there a pattern for splitting the effect generator across files? Is there a pattern for splitting the effect generator across
Generate.
files while still
Showing the yielded services depend.
The only way you can do this, if I'm understanding correctly, the only way you can do this is to pass it as a parameter. If I'm understanding this correctly, the class body effect can only yield static members like unit test layers. Is there a pattern for splitting the effect generator? Yeah, I don't know if I understand this 100%, but
One is there a middle
is
ground where
there
I get?
one file per operation, a type service boundary, shared dependency acquisition? Yeah, I mean, you'd have to do this.
No.
You'd literally have to do this. This is the only way.
Yeah.
Or every single one of these functions becomes their own service, which gets really annoying. But
But
then
yeah,
make get
sorry.
but then make get by ID can't use yield for other effects. It's just receiving. No, you can yield other effects if this thing returns an effect. You just can't yield other effects that depend on PG unless you provide PG internally. Like, you know, make get by ID PG postgres type. It would be actually type of postgres service dot, I think, type. Forget what it is in v3. In here, you could return a generator, or you could even make this an effect.fn if you wanted to. But if we want to keep things simple, you could return an effect.gen that does stuff, right? There's stuff being done in here. But like if the effects that are in here require this, then you would have to provide it. Post Chris.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is like, I don't know, this is really getting into the anti-pattern territory.
Mm.
Like this is the whole reason why layers and services exist, is to avoid you having to do this. So my recommendation would be to avoid this.
Yeah.
Like I would just, lean into the patterns that Effect has, split your services up into smaller services, and then compose them together into one larger service, right? I also don't be afraid of like big files or large services. There's nothing wrong with them other than, if your tooling is having issues.
Yeah. Also, like I feel like that leaning towards splitting your services sometimes also like allows you to discover better patterns, because for example, like in before you had like this repo service, and maybe if you have like a lot of methods that are query methods, maybe you can have like a service that has only the view methods of your like repo, and a service that have the write ones, and you are start dividing basically the write side and the query side. And that's better because probably then you may have part of your application that only requires the read side and not the write side, and then you have a service that guarantees the fact that you are not accessing the write side. So you are also have like benefits in trying to split in a like a more organized way your services.
Yeah, Luke, thank you for clarifying, and hopefully this makes sense. The final advice I think Mattia and I would both have is like just lean into the service pattern. Split services up if they feel like they're doing too much, because there's nothing wrong with having 100, 1,000, a million services. Like the effect is designed to have as many services as you want. It's more just like, does it make sense to split them up, or is it just like because you feel like the file's too big? Like me and my 1,500 line effect service. Yeah, same. I have some services that are enormous, or at least the default implementations are enormous, but I don't think doing the separation is worth it. Also, you can just define the service type, no implementation, then you can define the layer with external functions if you need. Yeah, sure. Every function their own service. Service stonks going up.
Service not.
Getting paid by the service count. Yeah. Uh can you yield the shared service on the class? Wait, can you yield the shared service on the class and
Oh,
provide it individually?
probably it meant like, can you inside of the definition of the Postgres service you have yield the other ones and compose it there? all of the small subservices into a single one? Is that what you're asking?
You're asking if you can do like const subservice equals yield my subservice, and then in here like just do dot pipe effect dot provide service my subservice subservice. Sure, you can do this. Actually, this is definitely not an anti-pattern. Like this is
Mm.
probably an intended usage if you have like one-off services that you want to provide to methods exposed by another. This is certainly possible. However, I would almost argue that this starts to become really annoying when you have 10 services that you want to provide, right? So like you keep having to do this, right? Like you just keep having to provide more and more individual services. So the easier way to do this, that would technically solve the issue on Luke's question. Yes, but you still need to yield the Postgres service within here. So yes, you could do that. I still think it's like not so idiomatic because then again, like testing becomes like really kind of a pain in the neck if you want to test those individual methods. I mean, you still have the benefit of the service, I guess. So if Luke, if you want to do it that way, you could. But the easiest way to do this, instead of yielding the individual services, is actually to yield the context. It's called context in v3, context, and then say like my sub service or my other sub service, right? And then this will give you a context object that has, I mean, these are not defined, but like it'll give you a context object that'll guarantee these things are there. And then you can just effect dot provide the context instead of having to like yield each one of these individually and then provide them individually. You could just do this. So yeah, I guess Luke, this is another option if you want to split up your methods. It's just it gets really annoying because you have to then provide the context to every one of these methods. And if you forget to do that, then you're leaking a dependency by mistake. So, but it's an option. Certainly an option. Good call out, Carnaloot. You can be temporarily moved off the imminent ban list.
Just temporarily.
Just temporarily until the next reminder that I need to make my screen size bigger.